1999, I think that Giovanni Pes and Michel Paula had been looking at how do we consider this health and longevity? Where we're looking at people who maybe are centenarians and super centenarians. They really wanted to try and explain as a demographer, the geography, the culture, all sorts of things to help explain why some people appeared to have this amazing ability. And so they looked specifically at Sardinia in Italy. And as they were looking at this area, they were using a blue highlighter pen. And the blue highlighter pen just ended up covering this entire space. So that's how it became the blue zone. And they made the comment about Sardinia in particular that there were no Western hospitals there. There was no hospital in this area where there were super centenarians. So they were discussing the concept that these people had ancestral diets. They were isolated communities. They were self-sustaining communities. They were growing crops. They were tending to their livestock. They were fishing. They were doing all of those things. So eating unprocessed food. They were part of a very close-knit community. They were out in the fresh air. There were lots of things. Interestingly, they didn't get a lot of sleep in Sardinia. They were quite a group of people. Well, maybe they slept in the mornings, but they stayed up late at night and had a lot of community, quite a bit of drinking, and they had a lot of celebration times. They were quite involved where they'd share their food. But this food included raw milk from sheep and goats that they tended. It included fish. It included pigs and lard. And I think when I looked into into the blue zone areas that they were looking at, we've got Okinawa in Japan, got Nicoya in Costa Rica, and Icaria in Greece. And they determined these 4 areas in particular seemed to be really suiting their concept of community, isolated, small communities that really relied on each other and relied on the produce that they were able to grow and produce and access. They then made the comment that potentially these groups then had some access to some Western medicine, maybe in their 70s or 80s, that gave them that extra benefit. Because when they looked at people who were younger and who'd already had access in these communities to processed foods, their life expectancy was nothing compared to these people they'd found were already centenarians or super centenarians in 1999. So, we're talking about a longevity pill that maybe doesn't even exist anymore. In 2004, Dan Buttner was contacted by National Geographic, or he contacted them, I'm not sure which, and they determined that, where's this longevity pill? We've heard some research being produced about these blue zones. How can we sell this? I would think, how can we sell this to America? How can we sell this to the world? And so, where's the 5th blue zone?
California?
How did you know?
Convenient.
Convenient. Loma Linda is the 5th blue zone that Dan Buttner identified. And unlike the other blue zone areas, this blue zone is affluent. They're very poor. Those other blue zones are so poor, but rich in culture, rich in what the land will produce, and very rich in family connections and whatever else. These people are affluent. They didn't live in Loma Linda all their lives. Most of them have come in as retirees. Not all, but a lot of certainly the people who've got this incredible longevity. And I'm not denying that there are some very healthy Seventh-day Adventists who have gained incredible longevity. And again, as we discussed, maybe they included a little bit of animal proteins and fats in their diet. Certainly this community that they come into Loma Linda is so supportive of no cheat days, no this, no that. They really are very supportive of how they can be the healthiest they can be. But in speaking to people in poorer areas that belong to the church, their health is nowhere like they're claiming in Loma Linda. Wow. So I consider this a region. They're trying to make it a culture. And so they're labeling all Seventh-day Adventists, and they're labeling their diet as the health and wellness component. But I believe it's Loma Linda that's the health and wellness component of a very select few people. 4,500 people are employed at the Seventh-day Adventist University Hospital. So it's a lot of people who are living there that are working for the church as well. But I think, this is really challenging. In 2009, Dan Buettner wanted to commercialize the blue zones. So he and Giovanni Pes and Michel Pula created the Blue Zones Project, and it's a copyrighted brand now. So they wanted to create this Blue Zones Project, and it includes the elements of fresh air, walking, reducing certainly smoking and alcohol consumption. But if you look at the other blue zones, they don't necessarily reduce alcohol, but certainly that Loma Linda is zero alcohol. And they just tried to tweak the findings, I guess, to create this plant slant diet, 95% plants. I mean, wait a minute, every single other blue zone included lard in cooking. They didn't have trans fats and polyunsaturated oils. They used lard. Loma Linda, part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they talk about the Garden of Eden diet, fruit, nuts, and seeds, but they do follow the clean and unclean meats of the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So pork is unclean. They do not use pork lard. Somehow they've convoluted, and people in Okinawa aren't going to complain. People in Sardinia aren't going to complain. This is an American project that they've tweaked the messaging, and people hear blue zones, longevity. You click to all of those places, and they've created this amazing utopia, and then suddenly plonked it all in Loma Linda and wanting to set it out to the rest of America. We can sell your community a blue zone. And I think I mentioned to you in 2018, I found a actual document of the contract, and it was going to cost $6.5 million for one small city, probably was a small city, to become a blue zone accredited. So that is, if you think about it, surely that's just consulting. That was just the consulting fees and an accreditation. It wasn't changing the landscape. It wasn't creating bike paths. It wasn't doing all those other things. It was just how the community was going to do it. So it must be a bit of a blueprint. My daughter's a change management consultant, and while you do slightly different things for each business, there's a template that you follow. I can't imagine it's going to cost them $6.5 million in consulting fees to create this template for a community to adopt these blue zone things, but that's how much it was going to cost. And so because they were really promoting the Seventh-day Adventist Church as Loma Linda and being a blue zone, the church has been very behind this whole promotion. And in 2020, they love it so much that in 2020, Adventist Health bought the Blue Zones Project. They bought the rights to it. So now Giovanni Pes, Michel Pula, Dan Buettner are not only sitting back from them selling the project for so long, but now Adventist Health is paying them to have this project. And if you look at the website, they say we want to get this Blue Zones community project out into every community on the West Coast, everywhere that we're involved, all up the West Coast into Hawaii. This is what we're going to do. And that's a big, audacious idea. But last year, in 2021, there was the 89th US Congress of Mayors. And this Congress is, I think 1,400 mayors attended, and you have to have at least 30,000 people in your community to be able to be part of this. And they passed a resolution that they were going to adopt the blue zones in their communities. And the thing is, when these mayors pass a resolution, it goes to Congress and it's accepted as policy by the government. Wow. So you haven't just got the blue zones running up the West Coast. Now you've got 1,400 mayors who've said, yes, we're doing this. And do people understand? And I think this is my challenge. I'm not anti-vegan, I'm not anti-vegetarian, I'm not anti-religion. I'm pro-choice, especially when it comes to health. And having understood how this ideology of the Seventh-day Adventist Church has silenced my husband, has impacted dietary and health guidelines worldwide, and now creating medical and dietetic education. And now the blue zones, this is where's the transparency that this is an ideology that's come about from a vision from God claimed by a woman in 1863? Do people realize that? Or are they just caught up in the hype and the media? And I think this is such an important thing to discuss. And do all these mayors realize it? I don't think they do. But at the moment, the media is pushing this plant-based message as being the best thing for people in planetary health. It's the perfect opportunity for the Adventist Church to use their entering wedge.
Yeah. Wow. That's so crazy. What a nice gig. I mean, to be working for National Geographic, to get in on this project, sell, I want to say 9 or 10 like best-selling, New York best-selling books, whatever. And then have this project that people are paying into that your town can get certified. And it is interesting to look at his work. Like, it looks decent. There's 9 different kind of pillars of health that they talk about. They talk about community, the importance of having a role. And you keep the grandparents in the house. They help raise the kids. They can help cook. They do all kinds of stuff. We know. I heard recently Dr. Tommy Wood talking about when we retire. The concept of retirement right off the bat is very, very young. But when you retire, if your plan is to just sit around and sit on a beach, like you're not going to need your brain anymore, and it's a really expensive organ. It's going to start to lessen its function for sure. He talks about walking, which is amazing. It's one of the best things you can do. The fresh air that you mentioned, getting outside, all that stuff is great. Number 4, I want to say it was number 4 is like eat a moderate amount. So stop when you're 80% full. Number 5 is eat a plant-based diet. Like, okay, then that part is all they really talk about. They emphasize and hit that so hard. And then when you look into, okay, what are you recommending for a plant-based diet? You go to another link, you see a pyramid looking thing. You're like, okay, what's this about? At the top of the list is to avoid meat. Don't eat meat. Its recommendation is have a 2-ounce piece of meat 5 times a month.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this, like, okay, what is 2 ounces? For you to visualize this, 2 ounces is a golf ball. Have 1 golf ball size serving of meat 5 times a month. The next one is avoid dairy, and there's no real details about that. The next one is have no more than 3 eggs a week. So you're eating 10 ounces of meat a month with 12 eggs spread out across that month. Give me a break.
Exactly. And it's not what the original blue zones ate. So I think that's the challenge. And yet, if you talk about blue zones, it just seems to be common sense because it's been marketed and so cleverly that people think it is a plant-based diet. Well, the blue zones is plant-based.